So welcome. My name is Jill Hasstedt. I am a retired director of Christian education from a big church in Belleville, Illinois, Zion Lutheran Church. So where I got to serve on the senior staff for 28 years. I also have a background in Lutheran teaching, so I was dual certified. But for many years, I have also had the pleasure of working with an organization called Kindle, the Karpenko Institute for Nurturing and Developing Leadership Excellence. It's actually called Kindle Servant Leaders because Amazon stole our name. But anyway, one of the initiatives of Kindle has been Kindle Finishing Well, which was designed to help church workers, especially DCEs at the time, but church workers in their last 10 years or so of ministry, finish well, go out strong, and then think about what comes next. We've since revamped that into a much shorter, more compact process that really got the pure gold out of that previous process. It's going to be called Kindle Next Callings. And our goal is to have a benefit for the worker, second chair leaders, so that would be anybody in a church who is not a senior pastor. Could be a DCE, could be a deacon or deaconess, could be a part-time preschool director, somebody like that, who is nearing the end of their career. And so that's a coming initiative. But there's a reason why we're talking about this. And that's because there is some of you may have been in some of the other sessions that talked about the coming sandsdemic. In other words, an absence of people where you expect there to be people. Far fewer workers in the workforce, baby boomers retiring in droves, not being replaced in the population that has been under replacement rate for almost 20 years now. So there's some good stuff to talk about. Some people can get very woe is me about, it's going to be scary, there's so much change. It'll be fine. So where this grew out of was my own journey from mid-50s to retirement. I'm 68 years old, so I retired about a year and a half ago. And as you get close to retirement, you kind of start to have a foot in two places. You got the full-blown ministry that you're doing, or work life in the case of lay people, but you're also thinking, okay, are we going to live here? Are we going to live someplace else? Are there grandchildren? Do I have caregiving responsibilities? There's all kinds of challenges. Yeah, it did flash, didn't it? So now, retired. I have a foot in two places, and I've got to think about how I keep both of those places going. So it reminded me, some of you have been to the Four Corners monument and stood and tried to lay your body across four places. Sometimes it's more than two places, right? So we were caring for my mother-in-law. We had a son who was still living with us and needed some support, and we had we had a lot of things we were juggling. Most people our age do, and most lay people in our congregations do. So it might be more than two places. So I have a few eye-openers, just really quick to take you through where we are. Most of my statistics, I have a few national statistics, but most of my statistics are Missouri Synod specific. Okay. So first of all, we do have a declining population. We do have an aging population. We do have worker shortages. These are just all facts. There are 6 million job openings and 3.5 million people applying for them right now.
We're not a declining population, are we?
Yes, we are. We are. Slowly but surely, the replacement rate is 1.7 right now. So we are declining, not counting immigration, which currently we haven't figured out how to do, right? But we are a declining population, yeah. Younger generations are having children later and at a far less rate. So then there's, in the national scene, that brings all kinds of Social Security and Medicare funding concerns, because the old model was big generations at the bottom, few people old at the top. That doesn't work anymore. And then I saw this book, which I don't recommend. But the title offended me because I'm a boomer, right? I'm right smack dab in the middle of the baby boom. I was born in 1955. And so, baby boomers have been a bit of a privileged class. We've been kind of like, okay, everything rose and fell with the baby boomers, right? And now that we're older, some people are considering us a liability. And they're talking about what's the aftermath of this boom, as if we were a disaster, right? Yeah, maybe we were. But, whoa. Okay. There we go. So, and then I went to the Office of Statistics at Synod, and I just started asking questions, and they were very helpful in giving me them. The single largest segment of active ordained workers is ages 55 to 64. That's 50% of our pastors, right? And they're not being replaced very quickly. It's going to be a sea change in how we do church because of that. And our baptized membership is the same. That's what the LCMS sent me, but the summary is that about half of Synod's membership is over 50 as well, as a church body. Somebody needs to do something. And everybody wants the people with kids, but maybe that's not the answer, right? So my suggestion is that if somebody needs to do something, guess who that somebody is, right? For me, it's the church's, it's an Esther moment for those of us who are seniors, right? And for anybody serving in a church that has seniors in it, which is all of us, right? So even my children's age and workers entering the field right now. So if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Well, we have a royal position, and we have an amazing opportunity ahead of us, both for ourselves and for how we can help congregations plan for the future. So here's what this is not about, this session. It's not about filling volunteer slots and making budgets work in a shrinking church. We're not going to talk about that. Those are realities. That's scary. I mean, somebody said the other day, will we have choirs in the future? Because everybody in our choir is 65 plus. Maybe we won't have choirs. I don't know. But the thing is, are those the right things to worry about? So what makes me excited is how might the Holy Spirit be on the move here, creating an army of people, us, people who are that 50 plus range, half of the church, right? Who sometimes, but not always, have extra time, more flexible time, we should say, because you get real busy in retirement real fast. As a generation, they have more money. Not everybody does. But certainly we have a big pool of wisdom, sometimes wisdom born of pain, right? But wisdom and knowledge. We've tackled a lot of problems in our lives. And how can we use all that for the sake of God's kingdom? So let's talk about the army a little bit. All these people, many of us in this room who are 50 plus. We are the most affluent of any age segment, and we hold 3/4 of the nation's wealth. You might not feel rich, but you probably are. Our per capita income as a generational group is 26% higher than the national average. Well, just think about that. We've paid off, many of us have been lucky enough to pay off our bills, and we worked hard at that before we retired. But this is a group that has money to contribute. And we have something called crystallized intelligence. Now, a lot of times we worry about losing our brains, losing our ability to navigate a more technological world or navigate a world that's changing so rapidly. And maybe we aren't as good at that. Maybe the generation 50 plus isn't as good at that, those kinds of quick change, quick pivots as younger generations are. But we have something they don't. We have heuristic knowledge. We have reasoning methods and problem-solving skills that come from having had lots of experience in life. So in general, we're better at creating strategies when we take the time to create them. It's not all rose-colored glasses, though, right? You know as well as I do that a lot of the 65 plus are economically insecure. There's some people who, for whatever reason, were not able to plan for retirement, and they're trying to live off Social Security, and that doesn't work. And so a big chunk of them are living below the federal poverty line. But there's those of us who aren't. That could help, right? So adults 75 or older have the highest average credit card debt, but only 28% of us have that debt. So the 28% of older adults who have it have a lot, right? So, yeah. So, and also the whole caregiving issue, right? My husband and I are both pretty healthy. The first couple years of our retirement, we were taking care of his mom, who is 96, and she's gone now. And I thought maybe we'd have about 10 or 15 years before one of us had to start caregiving for one another. Well, my twin brother has Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia. And he moved closer to his twin sister so that, because they didn't have any children, so our family could be a support to them in their old age. Guess what? Whole family is involved now. And so there's caregiving roles that you didn't expect maybe to have, and all of a sudden you have them. The older parent, you expected. The spouse or the other person in your family losing ability, maybe you didn't expect. And a lot of those people are caring for people with dementia. And 75% of all caregivers are female, but once you get over age 75, males and females are equal at caregiving. So the question is, how can we as a generation and as a church body adapt to this pretty cool changing environment, even though it's a little scary? The church is not going to die, people. God's got that covered. But we can we can ignite and invite people to participate in being more active in living out their baptismal callings in their homes as caregivers, if that's how God places them, or in their congregations, or in their communities. And I don't think we've talked about baptismal calling with adults enough, right? And so let's talk about that. How is it that we might engage and equip a new older generation for the coming years? I have some ideas. Kindle is working on this. I'm going to be piloting a program in my congregation. We've, in a sense, been piloting some things for about 10 years now, but we know some things have been working. Now, here's the issue. When if you've been climbing the ladder your whole life, whatever that ladder is, hard work in ministry, hard work in a secular field, what happens when you don't have to climb the ladder anymore? And how do you come off the ladder? And what's next? So that was one of my things, because I'm very much a type A, work hard, work long personality. And I thought, well, when I don't have work, what am I going to do? It turns out that wasn't a problem. But you can fall or be pushed off. Unfortunately, we know this happens to some people, right? They don't get to retire on their terms. They fall or get pushed off. This one I like. You can be careful but awkward. There's a cat going down the ladder, right? And my retirement was meant to be in 2019. I had to stay a little longer because of COVID, and I was the technology person on staff. So, there was a need. So I think it was I think it was more awkward than I thought it would be to retire. Or you can be part of a new adventure with friends of all ages. Because I don't know about you, but we have an older adult group that's hugely active. I would say it's the 75 plus set. They gather in groups of 60 people now together once a month. But they're the 55 to 65 and the 65 to 75 group don't want to go to that group because that's old people, right? So the church has always excelled at the intergenerational thing. We need to keep that going. And so my question is, because I believe if you're not dead yet, you have a calling. That's the old-fashioned idea of retirement, right? Sit in my rocking chair, which is okay for a little bit. Are we doing a good job of teaching calling to any age group? And to get them thinking about the value of their vocations, but also the value of their vocation as husband, wife, mother, worker, father, grandfather. Those are hugely important. But also, so is my contribution to my congregation and my community. Are we doing a good job of teaching calling to any group? You have a calling. Retirement isn't biblical. But Sabbath is, and rest is, and sometimes at the end of your work years, people kind of need that space to get over a high intensity work life or a awkward fall off the ladder. They need a little recovery. So one of the things we encourage people to do is, you may not have heard of sabbaticals if you're outside the college environment, but to treat your first 6 months to a year of retirement as a sabbatical. Rest, do some fun things, then start figuring out through prayer and Bible study and talking with people what's God's next step for your life. So, the first thing is to define baptismal calling, because a lot of people go, what? I'm baptized? What do you mean calling? Isn't that what pastors get? They get a call. I don't have a call. Yeah, you have a call. And it's to follow Christ in the unique ways he has prepared for them, where he has placed them, whatever that situation is. And to follow God's lead, not fill a slot, right? So if I'm helping you discover your calling, you may or may not want to fill the Sunday school position I so desperately need next week. But that's okay. Because I'm supposed to be about people and helping them find their calling. And God's going to build the kingdom. And if I just try to fill a slot, I'm not valuing the person. So to be Christ-like servants in their congregations, homes, workplaces, and communities. So here's the sad thing. Only about 1 in 4 people in retirement volunteer in a given year. How many of you volunteer? I'm guessing all of you. You're here, right? Yeah. I thought that was a little weird, but it's true. So for me, I should have put the first one as Ephesians 2:8-10, right? We're saved by grace through faith, and that's not of our own doing. But what does verse 10 say? For we are God's workmanship, and he has stuff prepared for us to do. So first of all, our baptism, we're grounded in God's grace, and we're mindful that he has a job for us. But baptismal calling is pretty simple. It's love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, right? Love your neighbor. That's not hard. I have 18 women in a Tuesday morning Bible class who've been studying the Bible their whole life. These are the women who've been in every Bible class the church offered and still are. And I'll say to them, maybe it's time to stop studying the Bible. Not really, of course, because you can always learn. But maybe it's time to get out there and start using what we've learned all these years. Or if you haven't had a time to be grounded in Scripture, to think about that as you're working. So, those. And then this is one of my favorite verses. I think it's such a good picture of the church. And it's such a good picture of the church in this era, right? Let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. You know what a spur is, right? It's not meant to wound the horse. It's on the back of your boot, and it helps steer the horse in the right direction. You don't jab it into the horse to make it feel pain, right? It's a spur. It's an encouragement to go in the right direction. And some of our older people, they haven't thought beyond grandparenthood or caregiving or the vacation. And so this is going to be a light bulb moment for them. But here's the key part, right? Which, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing. Because we need the spurring and encouraging of one another. And some of our folks don't know this Bible passage. They don't know they're not supposed to stop meeting together. But encouraging one another all the more as you see the day approaching. Because, let's face it, the future is shorter for us. So what if we didn't look at current and future retirees as human pegs to put in holes? You know, let's fill the slots we've created for programs we've designed, and instead focused on God, being God's instrument to help them recognize and affirm God's call. Then, first of all, I think we're going to find all kinds of new things that they start that make the kingdom well. And by the way, some things might die in the church that there aren't volunteers for. Maybe, I mean, if God wanted them to keep going, they would, right? There'd be a leader, there'd be people. Maybe it's time for a sea change when we see things aren't working. That's a little painful. If you've been teaching Sunday school for 35 years and you have a passion for it, I'm not saying kill it, but if it's dying all by itself, mourn it, find out what's the new way to meet the needs of young families if they're not coming. So, you know, that's the square peg in the round hole, and you hammer it in and try to make it fit. So somebody who's a retired teacher, they say, oh, you can teach Sunday school now. And they're like, I'm so tired of kids. You know, I've been there, done that. Or I'm scared to death of kids. If you taught little kids and they ask you to teach the junior high Bible class, it's like, wah! But again, in their congregations, homes, workplaces, and communities. So this time of life is a beautiful time, and we want people to think of their calling and to value whatever it is that God is calling into them. You do have a sense of purpose if you're a caregiver. You are doing something incredibly valuable. How can we honor what you're doing for your family and for your community by doing those things? So, how do you do this? First of all, you need to know who the people are who are in that age group in your congregation. Hopefully you have a database, but if not, sit down with the church directory and highlight them, right? There's always a way. And then invite that group of people. I'm going to invite them to a Sunday morning Bible class for 6 or 8 weeks. So there's a time limit, right? So I don't scare them off. I could invite them to a couple Saturday workshops. I haven't figured it, I haven't defined yet exactly what it's going to be, but this is the kind of thing I would normally do. So I know who it is. I send them all a letter. I kind of tease them a little bit about what it might be to rediscover their calling in their later years, and I invite them. And then once we're together, we work through a process that includes what wisdom have you gained in your life? What skills do you still have that you wish you could give to our church or to our community or to your home? And then teach baptismal calling, teach them what it is, remind them of their baptisms, and then invite them to come up with a plan. I'm going to show you the plan that I came up with. It's similar to plans I've helped other people come up with. It's not very complicated. But the first time you ask people to write down what their plan is, they will, I got to think about that. Yeah, you do. So, but that's going to be, their plans will change right? Every couple of years, or even because of some kind of event in their life, their plans may change. But to develop a plan that's flexible and based in the reality of their lives, and it's more than about money. Now, if you know some of your folks are in that 28% of folks who are in debt, that might be a time to invite Financial Peace University or some class like that to your congregation, and help them. But this stuff is not about the money part. It's about reflecting upon God's call in your life. So what we taught was how to visualize that. And we gave them lots of options. And we gave them questions to discuss with their spouse. Anybody who might be affected by their plan, like their children. We're going to move to Florida. The kids might want to know that. Right? Yeah. And if you've taken the time to build community and they feel safe in sharing in that group, and it could be that it's a small group, not a Sunday morning event, maybe a small group in a home. So what do you hope for? What's the reality? Who needs to be in on the conversation? What's God already showing you in your story? That may be a hint for what He has ahead for you already. And there's great discussion around this in groups. But you don't tell them the answers, you just ask the questions. So I used myself as the guinea pig. There's me. And my husband. He has a mustache. And we walked through this process, and we helped a group in Kindle Finishing Well walk through the process, and now we're adapting it for Kindle Next Callings. But there's a guinea pig praying. By the way, if you type in that you want a praying guinea pig image in Google, you get weird things. But I did find one cute one, right? So don't forget to wrap it in prayer. And by the way, some people don't know how to do that. So you might have to stop and teach people, how do you wrap this in prayer? Here's some sample prayers. Here's how you talk. Here's how you pray with your spouse if you've never prayed with your spouse before. I mean, sometimes you have to go back to the basics, right? Even with older generations. Oh. So what we said was, write some big goals. Fred and I had a financial long-term plan. We had long-term health care figured out because we both come from families where there's dementia, so we wanted that. We had that taken care of a long time ago, fortunately. But we moved. We built a house because his parents were still alive, and we thought they were going to have to live with us. So we built a house that was ADA compliant with grab bars and wide hallways for wheelchairs so that they could move in with us. And they died. But one of our sons moved in with us, so he didn't need ADA, but it was helpful to have an intergenerational family setup. Where were our friends? And who were our friends going to be in retirement? And would we stay in the same congregation or would we leave? Well, we chose to stay. And what did we want to do? At first we thought we wanted to camp. Then we looked at the cost of campers. And my husband said to me, we could stay in a lot of hotels for the cost of a camper. So, and for us, we wanted service to others to be part of our retirement, right? So then you have them write down the big goals and share those. And I don't worry about if they write the goals correctly or the way they're taught in teacher education. I don't care if they're SMART goals or not. They know how to write. They have their understanding of what a goal is and write them down. And keep reminding them to pray. So there is foundational work that needs to be done. When we did this with church workers, we found out how many church workers didn't know about Concordia Retirement Plan or how to access the Social Security and Medicare information. And there's a sheet on the handout, the last page, was a sheet I gave them. And that group took off on their own and did that. Because I'm not a financial planner. I said, you guys need to talk because the church's retirement plan for church workers is excellent. And it will give you peace of mind. And you might even get a raise when you retire, which happened to me. Know your net worth. A lot of people don't. right? And who can help you with that? Well, Thrivent will sit down with anybody and help them figure out their net worth because they want to sell them product, right? And so will the LCMS Foundation, Transfer the Blessings. They have a program that they'll do in any church. It's fabulous. And not only that, but think about how you're going to use that net worth when you die to bless your home, your congregation, your community, right? So we don't have to do these things because other people do them beautifully. And you can invite them to your congregation to do that. But this is a red flag, people who haven't done the financial planning. So my concern was being a bit of a workaholic. Would I be okay easing into non-work life and structuring my time when I didn't have a job and gracefully climbing down the ladder? So I think because I thought about it and we had conversations about it and I had a plan, it was no big deal. Then I said to this group who isn't very arts and craftsy, I said to them, so now you have to show your plan. You can do that any way you want. You can do PowerPoint. You can get those 3-sided science fair boards that you can buy on cardboard and put pictures all over it. You can bring objects, but bring some things that will will help you share your plan with the group. Because when you have to share a plan, that really makes you think also. And it also, people will talk to each other about their plans. Oh, I like that idea. Maybe I'll take that idea. I'll do that. So Lee was my mother-in-law. Aiden and Dana were my married son, and who lived with us for a while. Kenan, friends, siblings. We didn't get the camper, but we are traveling a lot. We do garden a lot because I didn't want to have a sitting hobby, right? Sitting is the new smoking. I wanted to not sit in retirement. And we got into the Little Free Library movement. Have you heard of that? That's a great thing. And I took up photography in retirement. I'd never picked up a camera in my life. And it's been a joy. Fred works at Camp Wartburg near us in southern Illinois, and he teaches high ropes courses because that's always been his thing. We cycle. We're active in our church, but not too active. And because I was a church worker there, I waited to be asked because I didn't want to say, I could do this, and after I retired, the people who took over needed to have their space. So, but when they asked, I said, yeah, I'd be happy to. And to keep asking the question, how is baptismal calling reflected here? How am I loving my neighbor? Who am I spurring and encouraging? Sometimes it's my kids. Sometimes they're spurring and encouraging me, right? Sometimes it's my friends. And then they created their presentation. I told them it could only be 5 minutes long. Guess what? Planned 2 or 3 sessions for that because they each took like 10 to 15 minutes. But everybody was so interested in other people's sharing that it turned out to be a thing. So they could do a scrapbook, a storyboard, some tabletop. If somebody brought in toys, toy camper, toy, a photo collage. If they were into technology and they wanted to do a video or a DVD, some people are. I said, or anything else you come up with, just so long as you can share it with us. If you want to do it verbally, that's okay. But they got really quite creative. I wish I had it. So, if we are blessed to be able to grow old together, and this is the things we were talking about, especially our desire to grow relationships outside the church, because I'd been a church worker my whole life, right? I thought, I don't want all my friendships to be in the church anymore because I don't get to share the gospel with people who don't know Jesus, so I'm going to do some other things. That's the house that we built. 9 years out. So the current retirees are retiring at about 66 or 67, so if you catch them at 58 or 59, that's really about the right time. We knew we wanted to stay where we are. We knew we wanted to build. I knew Fred needed a shop and I needed a front porch. It was kind of cool. And we knew intergenerational living was going to be part of it, and we also knew hospitality. If God was going to give us a house, then we were going to use it to bless others. And we wanted to be able to age in place in that house, right? So there are more steps there than I meant there to be, but once you get inside, it's all flat. There's our little free library. We have families with the bottom is all children's books and board books, and the top is adult books. And we've made so many relationships with families with young children. And people drop off books on our front porch. So there's never a shortage of what to put in there. One of the things Kindle talks about is witnessing willingly, serving others, growing in wisdom, and equipping to multiply. And those are the things we wanted to do in our retirement, and that I wanted to encourage people to live out in their baptismal calling. Now, I can't give you a process today and say, here's the steps, do this, but you're starting to see the pattern, right? And how it wouldn't be too hard to get a group of people together and start talking about this. I started canning for the first time in my life. I met so many people because I just started asking people at church, do you can? Yes. How do you do this? I have no clue. I'd never canned anything. I never had a garden in my life. This is all something I started at age 60 plus. So, and I now have a blackberry patch that gives me lots and lots of blackberries every year to share, right? So that's my garden. It's not very big, but it does give me a lot of tomatoes and a lot of zucchini, and the blackberry patch is in another part of the yard. So, again, these are some of the books that I used, but some people aren't readers. That's not going to be their thing. But the goal was to take the first 6 months of retirement. I had a plan before I retired, but I also just said, I'm not going to sweat getting all this done. I mean, I've been living by a schedule and strategic planning my whole life. I really didn't want to do it that much when I retired. But I had a plan and just kind of headed there shortly. So a time for Sabbath rest, to listen to God's voice regarding His call upon my life. And I got into photography. Those are some of my early pictures, so they're not the best pictures, but they are some of them. And I'm starting to do photography for our church website now, because they found out I knew how to take pictures, and they were paying a photographer like $500 an hour or something to come and do photographs. And when they saw I could take photos, I said, well, I'll do them for free, but you don't have to like them. If you don't use them, that's okay with me. You're not going to hurt me. So now on Tuesday when I get back, I'm taking staff pictures for the website. Not the kind that people buy, because I'm not that good, and nor do I want to get into that kind of photography, but just a picture like this that we needed for our church. If the generation of older adults was more ignited to participate in gifting the church with their baptismal calling, there would be a pastoral care boost. Our older members, those people who meet once a month, they keep track of each other. And when somebody goes to a nursing home, they visit them. When my mother-in-law was in a nursing home in Boone, Iowa, 9 hours away from us, her church visited her. And they would send her cards. She was not alone. And they would call us. Early when she was in assisted living and really needed to be in the memory care unit, they were calling us. Do you know what she did? I'd say, okay, thanks for letting me know. But what we want to do as a church is open doors to people living out the callings that God is giving them. And we're creating maybe a leadership pipeline, but maybe not in the church. Maybe it's in the community. Or maybe it's just a value and purpose pipeline, that they feel like they're valued and have purpose. And and the pastors are few and far between and getting more so, and they need the support of this group that's going to say, what can we do? Because we know you can't visit everybody, Pastor. Especially not in our church. We have one pastor for a church that worships 700 on a morning. But so we're fostering a community that cares for one another when there isn't enough pastor to go around. We empower people to live out their callings, and we're blessing future generations. If you have done this, you're going to have to slap yourself on the back of the head. If I see one more older person on Facebook say, they don't know how to read cursive writing, I'm like, what difference will that make in their life, right? Don't complain about younger generations. Every time you're tempted to complain about a younger generation, say, how could I bless them? Yeah. Because that makes them not like us when we're old and grouchy, right? I didn't like people when they were, when I was young and they were old and the boomer generation's going to take us to hell, all those hippies, and... But that's what we want to do. We want to be a blessing to one another, and we want to challenge the people in the church who maybe feel like they're done or they want a purpose but they don't know if they're wanted, to start figuring out, use that heuristic wisdom to figure out how they can be a blessing. But there's climate change, and the church has to pay their bills, and and I might have a stroke tomorrow, or my husband might, or it's a scary time of life, right? So that's when I like another Bible verse, right? It's the even if Bible verse from Daniel. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, climate change. Or whatever the blazing furnace is for you, some kind of trial, right? The God we serve is able to deliver us. The church is not going to disappear, especially if we're faithful in making sure that people know Jesus' love. And he will deliver us from the Majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. So we just do our best to be faithful to the God who loves us and whom we love. There's a really good book I encourage you to read sometime called A Praying Life by Paul Miller. But he says people of faith live in the desert. Well, there's that fabulous Bible verse in Romans that says, like Abraham, they are aware of the reality of their circumstances, but are fixed on hope. Paul describes how against all hope Abraham believed. So if you have those moments of discouragement when everything is against all hope, ask the Holy Spirit to give you more faith. Be strong. Be courageous. Don't be timid. Your God is with you every step you make. This is the message. I actually like the ESV version from Confirmation a little bit better. Be strong and courageous. So what do you think? Are we on track?
Mhm.
We came in late, so can you tell what that Kindle is?
Kindle is the Karpenko Institute for Nurturing and Developing Leadership Excellence. One of our upcoming initiatives is called Kindle Next Callings, where we take second chair leaders, people who are not the senior pastor in the church, DCEs and deaconesses, or even part-time people with leadership roles who maybe are not trained synodically. And we take them to if they're in their end of their ministry, like the last 10 years, maybe, we train them to consider what it is that they can do to end well, but also to plan for their next calling. And then we will be encouraging, we're designing a process for them to take back to their congregation to do exactly what we talked about. Identify the people who are 50 plus, begin the process of helping them to come up with their next calling and to use it to bless their congregations, homes, or communities.
And is there a website then?
It's kindleservantleaders.org. Okay. This card here has a QR code on it.
Okay.
That tells about next callings if you have somebody in your church who you think might be interested in that. But you don't have to, I want to say that you don't have to wait for Kindle to do it for you. We hope to have wonderful resources and webinars and things like that. But this is just a whole idea of igniting baptismal calling in churches is,
Thank you.
Good. All right. This is Michelle Pavasar. She's the executive director of Kindle. Did I get the title right? So, anything you want to add?
Well,
first of all, thank you, Jill, for presenting. And yeah, I mean, Kindle has a lot of different resources, devotional resources, Bible studies about the idea of Christ-like servant leader and the identity that we have in that. But I think what Jill hit upon is what we're most passionate about is that identity that we have as baptized and beloved children of God, and that we live that out our whole life. We don't retire from that identity or our identity as a Christ-like servant leader. And my engagement, like with a lot of folks in the over 65 retired, is that they want to serve, they have lots of gifts to give, but they're not maybe sure what the first steps are to take that. And they also have a lot on their plate, right? They're considering the finances of retirement and the health care and the caregiver roles and the different things. And I think the church just has such a beautiful opportunity to come along and encourage people at any stage of life, but particularly this. And we can be sad that the church, right now, the LCMS church is considered aging, or we have a diminishing level of church workers, or we can get active about the people who are there and pull together as the church and just do the ministry that God has given us where we're planted in our community.
Fill in the holes so we don't kill our church workers. Yeah, okay. Well, and by the way, my email is jhasted@gmail.com. And I would love to hear from you. If you do something fun, or you try some of this out, or you want to bounce some ideas off me, I would love it. Did you have a question?
I wanted to thank you for your presentation and for the work that you guys do. And make the comment as far as the contributions that any generation can make, but especially this generation, along with strength and courage and faithfulness. And I think the word you used was ignite. And the characteristic that connects with that to me is joy. And it's not undervalued or underappreciated that, gosh, if I didn't have really joyful Sunday school teachers when I was a kid, by the time I got to my junior and senior year of high school, and they came and asked me to teach the 3rd and 4th grade Sunday school class, if they made it look like such a drain, no way would I ever have said yes to do that. But to constantly live in your baptismal calling as a thing of joy, that becomes such a gift to everybody around you, whether that's people who share the same demographic data as you. Older adults being joyful about their baptismal calling is a blessing to older adults. And to those who are witnessing what a life alive in Christ looks like and lived out. So I wouldn't be a pastor if there weren't people, both from the time I was very little to even now, who show that the next 40 years I have ahead of me can be years of joy. And so I think that it can't be undervalued. That is a great gift, and one, even people who lack resources in other areas can still contribute in abundance.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So you want a referral? To the group here, I was blessed to go through Kindle Finishing Well. I think I completed it like 5 years ago.
And then what did he go and do?
Well, that's a whole other story, but my encouragement to you is that it was very, very beneficial to go through it. And so meaningful that for the people that I went through it with, we still meet monthly in a Zoom meeting. We read books and we have a community that goes on. I know that you guys do the same thing. And to watch them navigate these roads, to see a guy like Bill Johnson, who was a DCE for years, transition into retirement, to be there from when he was planning, getting his vision, to now he's adapting into that role. Jill, you did the same. Another brother in Christ, if any of you know Jim Bradshaw, who's now, looking forward to those next stages. It's such a blessing. And, when we get together monthly and get caught up again, it's very, very meaningful and been an encouragement, I think, for all of us to see what that next calling is and where we can best fit in to help build the kingdom. So,
well, and that would be the thing we probably need to say too, is you know as well as I do that isolation is horrible for older adults. So the more that we can create community and connection, good. Thanks, everybody. Yeah.
Layperson, okay, not
Yeah.
professional. But wait a minute. we've been volunteering and doing things related our whole lives.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, if we got together some kind of an invite for our congregation, and we have plenty of people in that age bracket, and you have people that they're kind of active, they're kind of like servant leaders, and you have other people that, they come to church, and then they're out the door.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have any advice on how to connect with the people who, as they've lived their lives as adults, have never really been all that engaged in
Right.
church-related service?
And they might not have been in a Bible class since confirmation. Right. So here's the thing. You invite them
And that's the thing.
in a group.
And let God work on it.
Yeah. And plant the idea. And since it's about them, it's not about filling a volunteer slot. They're not scared they're going to be invited to some pyramid scheme. You're inviting them to think about their future in some really positive and purposeful ways. And I think they'll come.
And doing it in a way that isn't just like, yeah, we're secretly trying to recruit, like I think you had it earlier in your presentation.
Yeah.
About we're just not trying to hook a bunch of volunteers or boost your giving or.
Yeah.
It's like no string attached.
Right. We won't even talk about those two things. Yeah.
We're for you. We want you to find what God is calling you for in this time. And we often don't take time to pause and do that. We might take time to meet with our Thrive financial rep or whatever, investment person. You might make time to figure out your Medicare because your health's important. But who's asking anybody who's in the 55 plus group to make time and think about what is God calling me to do that next? I have a 16-year-old and 20-year-old. There's a lot of conversation in our household about what comes next in their life, right? One's heading towards graduating from high school, one from college. What do you want to do with your life? What's next? What are your passions? What are your strengths? What are your gifts that God's given you? Where do you think He might be leading you? But who's having those conversations with the people in the 55, 60 plus group and saying, what are your passions? What are the strengths? What things has God built into your life so far? What do you want to keep doing? And what do you want to never do if you ever have to look at it again, right? Because in your job, there's always parts that you don't like, right? And you got to let go of. My mom was a church worker. I'm blessed to worship where she is. And when she retired, she didn't turn on her key to the church because she volunteers so much. And then people would tease her like, we see you around here as much, Joanne, as when you were working. She's like, yeah, but now I'm just doing the things I like to do. Doing my food pantry, my choir, my other things.
And there's far fewer meetings.
Nobody's looking for my teacher plans. I don't have to go to X, Y, and Z meeting or the stuff, So it's about how do we just come alongside people and say, God has this, He has a plan for you. So
I was flabbergasted by that statistic that only 1 in 4 volunteer.
Thank you.
You bet.
it might be a little higher in the church.
Yeah, it might be.
But maybe not.
Can I just share as a younger generation person?
Yeah.
Come alongside us, please. We need your wisdom. We need your insight. I had a church grandma, Barb, was with me for 10 plus years through high school. She would attend every youth group meeting. She'd make lemon bars every week. And she'd yell at us and we'd roll our eyes at her. But when I got in my 20s and started dating, and I'm like, how do you do this? How do you find your person? She just said, well, here's what John and I did. And I loved my John. I've been widowed for 20 years. But this is how much I loved him. And just by her sharing her experience helped me realize who I needed to be with. And because she invested those 10 years into my life, I could trust her with that. Even though I rolled my eyes at her in my high school years, she was still there. So be there if that's your calling. I know not everyone wants to work with youth. I get it.